All right, so I thought I would call this Injustice, Vicarious Trauma, and Burnout. And basically, the last 2 or 3 days for me has been a really hard time. And, I made a video about showing my battle scars fighting sin, and it's like, that was kind of like, okay, that's hardcore and stuff like that. And the feelings I got at the times that I did those things to myself were pretty hardcore and so on. But it wasn't continuous all the time for 3 days straight, where like I just heard about the treatment Pakistanis in Britain gave to girls and stuff like that, and I just and the Casey report came out, so it was like the outrage was like, oh my god, they're doing it on that scale, and it was that obvious, even with incomplete data, that they were the problem, and the government hid it, and it's like it's complicit on all levels of government to subject these little girls to the predations of foreigners. And it's like you hear about the individual cases, and then you're like, wow, it's going on that scale. And it's like I'm burnt out after 3 days. It's invading my dreams. I just wanted to be like a D&D bard and like a Christian monk and like be passive and peaceful and compassionate and like just chill and like maybe save up for a new computer and entertain people and so on and not really worry about the state of the world or anything like that, because at least our section is doing okay or something. I mean, it's sort of like in my neck of the woods, there's a lot of poverty and socialism is kind of wrecking society, but I figured maybe I could escape that or something if I get a new computer and entertain people properly and so on. And then maybe I would like get some clout and I would speak up against it and like put an end to it. But like the British thing and the injustices locally and just like all of it, like just the fact that it's so widespread and like systematic, not systemic. Systemic basically means you blame everyone, but you can't blame any particular person. Systematic means you can blame everyone in positions of power individually, like actually. You know what I mean? So it's not like an amorphous blob of like, oh, well, it's the system, man. It's like actually like the system and the individuals who make up the system is systematic, as opposed to the system, man, kind of like a vaporous sort of declaration, which is what systemic is. That's why they used to call it systemic racism, because they couldn't call it systematic racism, but they wanted the clout of saying it's systematic and so on. Um, without it actually being appropriate. So it was like a deliberate trick of wording to give the vibe of systematic without actually saying it, because they knew it wasn't accurate at all, basically. You know, um, and it conveniently ignores that a system is made up of individuals and that the individuals are responsible for the system, and that a system cannot exist without the individuals to make up that system, basically. Anyways, so the injustices of Western Canada, like the BC coastal province, and the federal government of Canada, and like the British government on all levels, basically throughout the country, and like it's just mind blowing, and like just thinking about it burns me out after 3 days, and I can't avoid thinking about it, and I'm like stuck raging out at it. And it's just like I'm burnt out, man. I want to stop thinking about it, but I can't, because like these people that I see every week or so at least, and like the little girls in the UK are like constantly, I just have my nose rubbed into the human cost of leftism and foreign mass immigration and so on. You know, it's like I can't escape it. I'm stuck living under the mercies of socialists personally, And I'm forced, because of my position close by to Skid Row, where the junkies and hobos all are, to see the human cost of leftism in my neck of the woods. And like, the Casey report tells you how widespread the Pakistani gangs, it's not even gangs apparently. Apparently it's like the entire familial and community structure. It's not like a bunch of bad apples from the community. It's like the entire community is responsible and knows about it and doesn't turn anyone in, and they're loyal to them and the supposed gangsters and the people who actually do it and so on. So they're like turning a blind eye to their own families' wrongdoing out of loyalty to Islam more than the country they live in as guests. So they don't recognize the value of not being a predator on children because those children are foreign in the country that they are guests in, when the children are native populations of it. And then they wonder why people hate them or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you're an invader and you're evil to the core. And like, the only reason why you're allowed to succeed is because we've got traitors and quislings in our midst that are hiding as much as possible your wrongdoing whenever anyone brings it up. And it's like, okay, yeah. Anyways, I'm just making this video to bitch and moan. Basically, it's just really getting on my nerves. We need basically paladins in society. People who are willing to physically fight for justice in the moment against the invaders and use the law against the traitors in government. And like, I don't know, it's just like, I mean, maybe the Nicolae Ceausescu downfall is how we need to play this out. Where someone like screams out at the top of his lungs to interrupt a propaganda speech, and then suddenly the entire country breaks out in mass protests, and the police can't keep it all down because so many people are protesting on the streets. You know what I mean? Like, just the sheer volume of people taking to the streets is so massive that it's so undeniable that the leaders, well, not leaders, the rulers, the regime, is illegitimate, even to the police and the Secret Service and so on, and the army. You know what I mean? Like, that overwhelming show of actual feet on the streets from the native population, to the point that if the police started to attack the protesters, then it would turn into a riot, and the rioters would win against the police handily. So the only option is to call in the military, and maybe even the military can't handle it because it's such a big group of people. And they're so determined to take down the regime that, like, nothing's going to stop it. And, like, it'll be a little bit like, you know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm dreaming of in a sense. Because I don't think the UK or Britain needs to wait 4 years just for democratic formalism. Democracy is people's power. Republic means will of the public or the general population. And sometimes that means it expresses itself through mass protests and riots and stuff like that. I'm not suggesting riots particularly much exactly, but the point of a mass protest, the point of a huge mob of people demanding one singular thing, always carries with it the backing of threat of force, right? Because that's the thing that the government uses to prevent people from showing up to protest sometimes and so on. So, like, I'm not saying, like, even if it were a riot, I wouldn't endorse, like, smashing random windows and so on, even if they even if the protest is against mass immigration and the Pakistani rape gangs and so on. Um, and even if the individual businesses tended to hire foreigners over British people or something like that, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the threat of force needs to be a potential aspect of major protests, and it needs to be so overwhelming through the sheer number of people showing up that the government cannot sustain or even like pretend to look good crushing it because it's so massive. Like the only way they could stop that particular protest is by sending in the military with tanks and like using the machine guns on the protesters and gunning them all down or something is the only way to stop them or something. And of course, by forcing to that point, you'd have defections from the military and so on, and the people would actually manage to force the government to capitulate, or else when the civil war hits, the people will win and lynch the people who are tyrannical and so on. It's a power calculation basically, and it might be necessary to remove the UK British Prime Minister and his regime earlier than later because of the sheer volume of complicity in the. I mean, they're glorified Vikings almost, right? When you think about it, like all that free gives me dat money and stuff like that is basically the Danegeld. And the Danegeld ensured more Viking raids and so on, of looting, raping, pillaging, murdering, and so on, to happen because they got what they wanted out of it. And Harold the Great, or Harold someone, Battle of 1066 against the Vikings at what's that bridge called? Stamford Bridge. And against the Normans, he failed against the Normans, but he won against the Vikings earlier and so on. And the only reason why he failed against the Normans is because the majority of his army was at the Viking battle. So a little portion of it was split into against the Normans or something like that. And the only reason he lost the second one is because he had to split his force to fight both at the same time, or one closely after another. And that's it. That's the only reason why he failed to defend from them, and so on. And, but he won against the Vikings, and the Normans took over eventually and started doing similar things with fortifying ports and harbors and villages by the seaside against Vikings and so on, so that the Vikings would have to do massive invasions. And a massive invasion takes some time to do its thing and travel and so on. So the Norman British could rally the forces to crush the Vikings, because they had superior numbers. And the fortifications on the seaside were there to prevent the small raids that are the only thing the Vikings could do that would manage to hit before the British people could rally themselves into soldier armies and so on to crush the invaders. So the only way that the Vikings could manage until the fortifications prevented it is by doing like 1 or 2 boat raids or something small like that, or something stupid, and then leaving as soon as possible before the troops could rally for the defenders. And the fortifications prevented even that from happening. So, and it's definitely a war thing. It's a warfare thing. You have to defend your borders against Vikings and invaders and so on. You can't just let them in because they don't have weapons at the moment, because they get weapons when they come in. And they tend to pick on people who they don't need weapons against, to dominate and ruin and hurt and so on. And paying them extra money just makes more of them come over. It's not just enough that you cut off the money supply. You have to like drive them out of the country too to get the maximum number of them out. And you do need to get rid of those foreigners. That's non-negotiable, basically, for the sake of the survival of Britain, Canada, and the USA. Um, you know, um, and you got to drive the left out of power too, as much as possible. Basically, I mean, the left is absolutely horrible in my neck of the woods, and I don't know if the child predator gangs in BC are as bad as the Britons, but like even so, there's a little bit of special flavor to BC where they literally pay the wages so a business doesn't have to of foreigners to hire foreigners over native Canadian citizens. So even if the child predator thing isn't as bad, the poverty trap of native-born citizens is worse relative. And it's like, okay. So it's like, oh my God, what do we do? And so on. But yeah. Anyways, part of the reason why I'm making this video is to vent and like decompress a little bit and so on. Because like I just, this stuff is like so horrible, and like I see the destruction it does in my daily life, and I see what it does in Britain, and it's just like the motherland and its colony, Canada as the colony, Britain as the motherland, are hurting real bad. I'm glad the USA got Trump, because he's putting a stop to all that kind of jazz, federally at least. But looking forward to it happening in Canada and Britain as well, basically. And it's just god awful. It's like a vision of hell on earth, sort of. And like I don't use that lightly exactly, because I know what it's like to feel like you're going to hell no matter what you do, because you did something evil that you can't necessarily understand or remember exactly what. And like the confusion and like the sort of like every little thing you do is going to send you to hell, and therefore like take a knife to yourself because God commanded it out of retribution for your evil ways, even if you kind of remember doing some bad stuff, but it didn't seem that evil to the degree that you had to take a knife to yourself 46 times like I did, or 35 times in 10 poison attempts. But like, I mean, the other thing that gets me going as well, and why I can't let go of this, is like, I heard some of the stories about what the girls were facing from the Pakistanis, and it was like, oh my God, they got it worse than I did with all that stuff I mentioned. Like, I had the fear of going to hell no matter what I do, but at least maybe it'd be slightly less horrible to me in hell if I end myself, and like 46 attempts, because I truly believe that. And like, even with the terror and the pain physically, and like the sort of like, oh, I have no future no matter what I do because I've messed up somehow and I don't understand necessarily fully how. And like I thought, like one time I thought I was going to end the world somehow through my activism or something, and mess things up and so on. And like the thing is, all of that doesn't even compare to what the Pakistanis did to little girls. And that's the thing. Because I understand even like a reasonable degree of like what they've been through, sort of, through my schizophrenia or signs from God or both or whatever you want to call it. I've been through hell on earth in my mental state and physical state and I was homeless for a year and a half basically too. So it was like, that was when the majority of that whole like you're the Antichrist, kill yourself. Okay, you stabbed yourself really hard, and you're not actually the Antichrist. I just wanted to make sure that you punish yourself a little bit because you did some wrong things, and it's okay now. I'm not going to say that again. And then, like, 2 weeks later, he's like, "You're the Antichrist again," and I'm like, "Okay, I have to believe it because it's from God." And it's like I can't let myself disobey the closest thing I know to God when it comes to punishing myself. Hurting other people, no. Punishing myself, yes. And it's like that kind of feeling, and that's actually a fundamental part of what those little girls are going through themselves in that exact manner because they feel, because they're children, and one of the things children often do when they're first hurt in a psychopathic way is they assume they're to blame because the adult knows best. So like I actually understand a piece, and that's one of the things that's so evil about it. It's not that the little girls are like, oh my god, these people are evil and they're hurting me. It's like they internalize I'm bad because they're hurting me. It's like one of those constant things. And one girl was like cutting herself 209 times, like with razor blades. And like I only cut myself like 15 times with a razor blade, you know, and like 20 times with an actual knife. I mean, 16 stabs and like 4 times with an actual knife on my neck, basically, and then like cut myself like 15 times with razor blades on top of that. But like, okay, so she cut herself everywhere she could reach 209 times. Mine is 35. That's hell on earth. Hers were 209. And that's a response to what she got beforehand. So mine is the trauma in the cutting myself, and hers is the trauma, the cutting herself after the trauma. So she's gotten, like, even if she did it 35 times like me, she's got double the trauma from what happened to her by the Pakistanis and what she did to herself out of numbness, pain, dead insideness, feeling like they were the dirty one, not the Pakistani, and like the internalization of abusive treatment as justified because they're bad is a consistent problem with children who are abused. And I share that a little bit with physical abuse from my childhood and so on. So I actually got a good vibe of like, not a good vibe, but like I vibe with those girls a little bit in a sort of disconnected way, a little bit separated individual categories, a little bit, but I've gotten like a little tiny fraction of what they've experienced at the hands of Pakistanis. And let me tell you, what I've actually endured is like mind-bendingly horrible, and I can't imagine how bad it is for them. Like the despair and the terror and the fear of divine retribution is what caused me to try and destroy myself 46 times. I didn't care how much physical pain it cost me at the time, as long as God would stop telling me I'm the Antichrist. And these girls have gone through more physically abusive stuff, and they've not only, like, it's the internalization of I deserve this and it's the most horrible thing, and most normal people think, oh my god, that's horrible, how could that happen to you, why would you ever think of doing that to yourself, that makes no sense, and so on. And it's like it's so horrible, and I understand what they're going through at least a little bit, and that's why I can't let go of it, because when you understand what they're going through because of those Pakistanis at all, it like rips your soul out of your body vicariously, which means through another, basically, um, or sort of by proxy, by like if someone, like almost like someone kicking someone in the balls, and then the men going like, "Ooh, that really hurt," kind of like that, kind of like, "Oh my god, I felt that," by watching the other guy actually have a half moon. So it's like, okay, like I can't let go of this right now. I have to let go for my own sanity, but I feel like I can't let go because these little girls need someone to speak up for them, and they deserve a chance at a future and a life. And I feel like I've failed. I mean, I know my videos don't get a lot of traction, so maybe I'm not really doing anything at all, but I feel like I have to try even just to satisfy the my own sanity for the sake of these girls. You know what I mean? Like, it's so gripping. Like, I think of the best way to describe this is basically the World War II soldiers, when they were invading Nazi Germany on D-Day and so on, and they see the blood and guts, they're like, oh my god, I'm so disheartened, our people just died like crazy and so on, and it's really hard fighting in the Normandy bushes, and there's like a 2-to-1 death ratio compared to the Germans, and it's like really awful or something like that, you know, and like you're constantly losing people you know and so on, and then you hear about the Holocaust, and you're like, oh, that's why we're fighting through hell for the sake of rescuing those poor souls who are even worse because of psychopaths, murderers, totalitarian tyrants, and genocidal maniacs. Um, you know what I mean? Like, it's like actually like these reports from the Britain about those girls' treatment and the fact that it was so widespread is like this is our World War II. This situation with the left and the mass immigration and the constant abuse of children and the replacement of our people and so on is this generation's World War II. And all the sickness and the misery and the suffering and the death is our sacrifice. And I use that in a technical sense. A sacrifice is something valuable you give up, peace of mind, let's say, for the sake of something worth more, which is justice, nobility, rewarding hard work, honesty, and the well-being and wealth of our people. To save it from dysfunction and to return proper functionality to our societies and so on. And we have to go into the mouth of hell to rescue the prisoners of the devil and to take out the tyrants